Okay. Hopefully that's all going ahead. Let's crack on and see how we're doing. Let's just raise the volume a little bit there on the audio just to make sure that we're all up. And there we are. I think that should be everything all fine. Okay. Hello. That is everything ready for today. Long lesson. Well, not long lesson. Long section of the text today. The last scene. We're there. It's finished. Ish. Hamlet. I say finished. We're not obviously going to finish Hamlet here. We'll spend the next week doing some revision, and what we'll also do as well is crack on with some more Hamlet stuff going forward. With that in mind, obviously the revision has to come in now and start now. We will be coming back to it in your second year once we've finished your poetry. So we'll be coming back to Hamlet and the Duchess of Malfi, so make sure you're revising. And make sure, remember guys, that you've got a Duchess of Malfi assessment this week to be doing, which is one of the three topics that you've got to do today. So remember guys, tasks this week are read and annotate Act 5 Scene 2, present a review of the critical, just a general page of, as I said, critical interpretations on the end of the play. So reviews, critics, that kind of stuff, different versions, how they've handled it, that kind of thing. And the last one, all the way down here, is to complete your chosen Duchess of Malfi essay. There were two options. I can't remember exactly what the topics were that I set now. I believe one of them was justice, and the other one was Basola. So I'm kind of anticipating a lot of Basola essays, if I'm honest. But we'll see if I get a couple of nice surprise justice ones in there, because I think both of them are good questions. I think it's just about what you choose. So make sure that gets done. But we're going to crack on with Act 5 Scene 2. As I said, a lot to do today. I'm going to be skipping chunks in small parts, simply because some of it is a little bit inaccessible and not really necessary for you. I mean, there are genuinely sections of the scene that I don't see what you would use them for in an exam. So it's fine to kind of go past a couple of things. If we get nearing the end and I feel like this just is not going to get finished today, then what we'll do is I will we'll take a break, and I will end it today at about just past 2, and then I will set up another stream maybe sometime later in the week, Friday morning maybe, or Thursday or something, to finish it off. But hopefully we'll get through all I want to do today. What I am going to do though is from next week onwards, we'll still be doing this lesson as a kind of main lesson, so to speak, to go through some kind of core content. We might use this slot maybe for some Zoom calls or whatever it is, but it'll be revision content, going over the two plays, exploring some bigger ideas. But what I am going to do is in the second half of the week, just to kind of make sure that we've got all this stuff online, is I'll be going back to, so I'll be doing a second lesson in the week where I'll be going back to earlier scenes that we didn't cover via computer, via stream, and I'll be going back over them again in this same format, so that come the end of the course and over the next year or so, you will have a full play's worth of these streams to watch. So when you're doing your revision for your exam next year, all of this will still be online. And we'll get to that with the Duchess of Malfi as well. I'm preparing some for what will inevitably be next year's first year students. You guys becoming the second years, which will be obviously a big change for you. But yeah, those students will be getting some stuff made for them for Duchess. So I will probably be running that out to you as well. Okay, so that should be pretty good. With that in mind, let's just speed on because we've got to get going. So let's move on to that. Here we are. I'm not even going to spend too much time on the themes content today on the side, because I think we just need to get on with it. Although let's just have a quick think. I can't remember. Let's see which themes will be applicable today. Revenge, key to the scene, obviously. Grief, a little bit, or the lack thereof. Death is going to be absolutely key. Power and class might come up a little bit. We're going to come up at the start with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern a wee bit. Madness is going to come up again, so that should all be pretty straightforward. So we start with this just overview from Hamlet as to the nature of his escape from his journey to England. and he's just generally talking about his overall kind of approach to things. But there's some nice quotes here on something that I'm going to talk about now. Maybe an extra theme that I think um, I will add up on here in a minute. Possibly is this idea of what I would describe as fate. Yeah, I think this idea that Hamlet at this stage in the play starts to be more accepting of ideas of fate, and his approach to life seems to be more fatalist. What we mean by that is that he is essentially giving himself over to whatever will happen. He's kind of taking the, if it's meant to be, it will be approach. This line here says, our discussion sometimes serve us well. When our deep plots do fall, and thus we should learn, there's a divinity that shapes our ends. Yeah, rough hew them how we will. So there's an idea here that there is a overarching divinity, a kind of god perhaps, or something that should give us an idea of what will happen. Yeah, and he's saying that look, we rough hew them, i.e., we chop the ends off. Maybe not necessarily exactly as it was meant to be, but that generally the broad path of our life is determined for us. And this is the first time that Hamlet really starts talking like this. Elsewhere, he's very much kind of focused on what he's doing with things, but here he starts to change his kind of tune a wee bit. He then goes on to retell the story, how up from his cabin, his sea gown scarfed around him in the dark, he groped to find things out. He basically found in their packet that they were taking with them. He snuck into it, takes the stuff in the packet, and he goes back to his own room, taking what they've got with him. He finds the commission that they've taken with them, i.e. the letter that they were taking with them to England. He says a royal knavery. So this is like, that the king has been a knave, a kind of villain. He says an exact command, larded with many sorts of reasons importing Denmark's health and England's too, with hoe and such bugs and goblins in my life that on the supervised no leisure baited. No, stay not to the grinding of the axe, my head should be struck off. So he's like, look, I found the letter and it said, if, when received, that Hamlet should be executed by whoever in England. Okay, which is pretty good as a trick from the king. So Hamlet is furious about this, and Horatio seems almost disbelieving at this point. Is it possible? And Hamlet shows him the commission. Read it at your leisure. And then he's like, but what would you want to know now? Do you want to know what I did? And Horatio is like, yep, tell me what you did. So Hamlet is like, look, being surrounded by villains, or I could make a prologue to my brains. They had begun the play. I sat me down, devised a new commission. So he wrote a new letter. So he took the original one and rewrote it. I once did hold as our status to a basis to write fair and laboured much, how to forget that learning, but blah, 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 blah. Basically, I wrote a letter. He's like, do you want to know what I wrote? Yeah, so will thou know the effect of what I wrote? And Horatio's like, yes, obviously, because I just told you I want to know what you did. And Hamlet is like, cool, I wrote an earnest conjuration from the king, as England was his faithful tributary, as love between the two shall flourish, as peace should still her wheaten garland wear. So he gives us this very kind of elaborate, like overly formal kind of introduction that essentially the knowing what is going on, that the king should put the people holding the letter, the bearers of the letter, to death. No time allowance. So he changed it that rather than him being killed, that it's whoever's holding it, i.e. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, because it's in their kind of belongings, that they should be immediately put to death. Okay, which is pretty cruel. I don't know. I mean, I find at this point that Hamlet, there's no need for him to change it to kill them. Like, I'm not sure that there's any explicit thing that anyone had to die here. It's just very clear that Hamlet decides at this point then things. And Horatio's like, well, how was this sealed? How was this made legitimate? All legitimate letters at the time needed a royal seal of approval on them to be kind of taken as legitimate. And Hamlet says, well, look, even in that was heaven ordinance. So Hamlet starts to believe in this kind of almost predestination. He starts to believe in what we might call providence, where he believes that everything's kind of being laid out for him, almost as if fate is moving him onwards towards what he needs to do. he realizes that he had his father's signet ring in his purse, which obviously on the ring bears the royal coat of arms. So he uses that to, you know, press the wax that he uses to seal the letter. So he is able to use that to get this thing done. He then does that, and then we have the sea fight, which we've already had. That's the pirate stuff that we already had in the letter a couple of lessons ago. And then Hamlet is like, yeah, you know that already. So there's a real element of like fate and kind of fortune in Hamlet's return, which Hamlet almost seems to ascribe to himself. Now, whether it's very clear or not that it is or isn't, I mean, obviously it's a fictional work, so it's going to do that anyway. But Hamlet certainly seems to be kind of like caught up in this idea that he's been brought back for a reason, that he has a kind of purpose in being back in Denmark, which helps given that he's kind of prolonged the whole play. Horatio kind of just acknowledges that Guildenstern and Rosencrantz go to it, i.e. to die, and Hamlet just says, look, you know, they're not near my conscience, I'm not thinking of them, basically. He says, look, their defeat does by their own insinuation grow. So Hamlet's quite remorseless with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, feeling that basically they've kind of done this to themselves, realistically, is his argument there. He says, "'Tis dangerous when the baser nature comes between the pass and fell incest points of mighty opposites." So basically he says, what he's trying to suggest here is that they have put themselves in danger by getting between Hamlet and the king, which is a really kind of interesting line. The baser nature as well, that theme of class and status, wherever I put that. No, well, death, yes, absolutely. Power and class, there it is. It's certainly relevant here because he's kind of saying these baser, i.e. lower levels of people coming in between the mighty opposites in Hamlet and the king is almost kind of their own fault for dying. Horatio then asks, what kind of a king is this? And we have this really explicit, aggressive nature from Hamlet here. It says, does it not think thee stand me now upon? He that hath killed my king and whored my mother, popped in between the election and my hopes, thrown out his angle for my proper life, and with such cozenage, is it not perfect conscience? So Hamlet, like, is it not perfectly legitimately possible for me to now kill the king? Yeah, he's like, there is no reason why I shouldn't now. He has killed my dad. He has, as Hamlet phrases it here, whored his mother. Now that's a separate issue. Obviously, we can kind of go back to that again and again. He has popped in between the election and my hopes. This is the second time and the only other time in the play that Hamlet acknowledges that perhaps he has an issue with the king being the king. There's perhaps an argument here that Hamlet might actually not be happy with that scenario. And he talks about this thrown out his angle for my proper life and with such cozenage. Now that throwing out that angle again is another reference to fishing. It's like the fourth reference to fishing we've had in the play. I'm not sure why it's such a running theme as such, but again, this idea of the kind of the schemer here, throwing out his angle for my proper life. So he's basically trying to get Horatio to tell him that it's legitimate. Now, interestingly, as he says, like, is it not perfect that I should kill the king? We have Osric, the most sucky-uppy courtier, comes in, and he enters just on the end of that line, which is quite an interesting one to look at if you want to look at the way in which kind of stage directions and specifically entrances and exits in the play are used for effect. Here, quite an obvious one is a little bit of tension. It's like, has Osric turned up and heard the end of Hamlet's speech there? Maybe that's a thing that's happened. Again, it's not clarified, but it could be a thing. So, you know, something to bear in mind there. So, Osric comes in, and he does his normal kind of, your lordship is right welcome to back to Denmark. He does his kind of proper, suck up sycophant job. Hamlet, says like, thank you. And he's like, look, and we have the a comic use of the aside here, and it's quite a funny scene, this section. Interesting that in the last scene, just before the death of all the main characters, Hamlet's got quite a funny little jokey scene here with Osric. So he's like, he just turns to Horatio and he's like, do you know this water fly, as we say, I suppose. And Horatio's like, no, I don't know who this guy is, which seems odd given how long Horatio's been here now, but never mind. Hamlet's like, look, you're better off than not knowing him, yeah? Thy state is more gracious for it, is a vice to know him, i.e. it's almost a kind of a character flaw to know to know who he is. He has much land and fertile. Let a beast be lord of beasts, and his crib shall stand at the king's mess. 'Tis a chuff, but as I say, spacious in the possession of dirt. So basically, Osric is he's well landed. He's got position and land and status in that sense, but he's basically otherwise just a bit of a useless tool for the king. So we have this kind of presentation, really, of the kind of corrupted court of Denmark, only really, or at least not necessarily corrupted, but at least kind of useless, really starting to be expanded upon here with things. Something that we see much more prominently, isn't it, in the Duchess of Malfi, where we have like 2 or 3 scenes with the kind of general courtiers who are all kind of just either useless or evil. Here we just have this one scene. So Osric starts to try and have a conversation with Hamlet, having obviously for politeness removed his hat, and Hamlet starts making fun of it. He says, "I will receive it, sir, with all diligence of spirit. Your bonnet to his right use, 'tis for the head." And Osric's like, "No, I'm quite warm. I don't really want to wear my hat, so I'm not going to wear it." And then Hamlet's like, no, it's very cold. The wind is northerly. And Osric's like, okay, yep, it is cold, indeed. And we assume then, obviously, the stage directions aren't there, but we will assume he puts his hat on. And then Hamlet says, yeah, actually, you know what? It is very warm. And actually, maybe you shouldn't be wearing that hat. So Osric is then like, yep, it is very sultry. He's like, very warm, so we assume he takes his hat off again. And that's this kind of little bit of Hamlet playing around with Osric at this section of the play to kind of reassert his dominance. Now, if anyone can point out in the comments, please, before we, as we're moving on this next section, what that bit calls back to. There's another moment where Hamlet plays around with a member of the court to try and prove their sycophantic nature that was earlier on in the play. So if somebody could drop that into the comments as we go, that'd be fantastic. Great marks to anybody who can get that. So Osric signifies that he has laid a great wager on his head. The king has laid a great wager on Hamlet's head in a duel. Now, I genuinely do not think it's worth us going through this section of the text in any close detail. All to know is, if we praise Laertes here, we have some general praise of the couple overall. In general, we mention what the stakes are, what the kind of bets and things, what they are betting on and for, that they're going to be doing some, I believe, some dueling, and that there is some potential. There is some potential winnings of things. Oh, let's see in the comments. Annabelle is absolutely correct. It is when Hamlet is talking to Polonius about the clouds. Bang on. Very much accurate. Well done. So yeah, we find out what the winnings are potentially of this bet, what Laertes stands to gain from it, and what Hamlet stands to gain as well. There's some jokes about penises, as always. And then we find out what the actual bet itself is. Now, the bet is so weirdly complex that, in terms of its phrasing, that it's often quite difficult to read. And I think most critics, in fact, argue with one another and what the actual impact of it is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly just show you an extract. If you open up, you should have it on your own anyway, but I'm going to show it to you on here. What the odds are. So I took this from an essay, actually I think written by a statistician as well as a Hamlet scholar, on the odds. And here he's just going to tell us what the odds are, because I think it's actually really confusing otherwise. So the odds are as follows: that they are doing a fencing competition. To be clear, fencing obviously is just where 2 people have a rapier and they need to hit, I believe, various parts of the opposition, and that is a pass. So a pass would be when they play until a point. Okay, so it's a 12-point match. So the conditions of the match can be clearly stated. The only way Laertes can win is to score 3 hits in succession within the 12-hit limitation. Hamlet, on the other hand, need only keep Laertes from scoring 3 in a row. Or, of course, he can score himself 3 in a row. These are the conditions that have been established, and then much of the action in the last part of the play can be seen in the last. So those are the conditions of the bet. I think this is the argument to make. You don't really need to go into too much detail. However, the thing is it's it would be weird to make them play all of these out, so it goes quite quickly. But to make it go quite quickly, Hamlet needs to win quite quickly, which he does. And actually, what we do is we have some setting up of that. It's not that Hamlet is necessarily while Hamlet on the terms of the bet is rated the underdog. Hamlet has the much easier job of winning this match, and the odds seem way stacked against him. Laertes seems to be very good. We have a couple of references earlier in the play. Hamlet talks about going into being continual practice since Laertes was away. And Hamlet's skill as a fencer keeps getting established up into some dialogue here. And you can skip to this section in your text if you want. The king will ask Hamlet, do you know the bet? You know the wager? Very well, my lord. Your grace has laid the odds on the weaker side, i.e. you have placed all the odds with Laertes, who is the weaker fencer. And the king will says this, I do not fear it, I don't doubt you. I have seen you both. I think I know that you're the better fencer, but since he is bettered, he is preferred by the other lords and stuff, we have the odds that we have. Yeah. So hopefully this explains it, and actually why perhaps the king is so keen to have the poison cup of wine as well, and his approach to that scene with the extra poison cup of wine, which is there to take Hamlet out should Laertes fail, because the odds being on Laertes makes it seem, well, like, if he's so good at fencing, why do we need the cup of wine? Why doesn't he just win it that way and slash Hamlet? And as we find out when we get to the fight scene, is that Hamlet wins quite comfortably. And there you go. Hopefully that's some of the confusing odd stuff. Otherwise, most of this is just Osric talking in an excessively formal manner, and Hamlet ribbing him for it. And then eventually Osric heads on once Hamlet says that, yes, I will engage in this bet. And it turns out that Hamlet very much even knows that he is probably here onto a losing thing, or at least that there's some kind of thing here in it for him. Now, at the end of it then, he runs off. Horatio says this lapwing runs away with a shell on his head, so Horatio makes a kind of disparaging comment as he leaves. And Hamlet picks up this kind of critique of him as he goes. Yeah, did so with a dog. You get the idea, it carries on. We then have a second lord who comes in and basically says, the king commended him by young Osric, who brings back to him that you attend him in the hall. He sends to know if your pleasure holds a play of Laertes, or that you will take a longer time. So Osric has just gone back, right? I mean, this is what, 446, he's come back, literally from the next page over. Osric leaves, and then immediately we have the second lord come in to be like, by the way, now that you've agreed to this fight, do you want to do it now, or do you want to wait for a little bit longer? That's over here. And Hamlet is like, yep, nope, I am constant in my purpose. They follow the king's pleasure. If his fitness speaks, mine is ready now, or whensoever, provided I be able as now. So, Hamlet's like, look, we'll get it done. We'll get it over with. So it's going to happen immediately. We're not looking at like another scene's time. We're looking at this happening right now in this scene, which does make 5-2 weird structurally. It feels like it's almost like the first half of it, this Osric betting section, should be 5-2, and then there should be a 5-3, which is the dueling scene. But this little section with the Lord in the middle ramps up the pace of the scene a little bit. So we end up with, I suppose, how to put it? Just a almost quite compressed and rushed feeling. This is quite common, as you will remember from the end of the Duchess of Malfi. The fifth and final, the end of the final act is always a lot of characters piling onto stage, and usually their bodies piling up as well as they die. We have 4 deaths, 3 deaths at the end of 4 bodies on stage, but 3 deaths in the end of the Duchess of Malfi. We're going to have 4 here. So Hamlet's like, yep, I'm well on to do this. And the queen is like, she desires to see you to use some gentle entertainment to Laertes before you fall to play. So the queen basically wants you to maybe make some apologies, perhaps, or at least show some respect to Laertes before you have a fight. So there's a desire from Gertrude. So Gertrude is even asking Hamlet to act nice with Laertes before they fight. Given that the last time they saw each other, Laertes was trying to strangle him up by the side of a grave. So that is probably somebody you might want to make a little bit of amends with before you start fighting with swords. Horatio says, "You will lose, my lord." Horatio seems very dubious about the odds here. And this is where we get that line that we saw a minute ago from Hamlet. He says, "Nope, I've been in continual practice. I shall win these odds. Thou wouldst not think how ill all's been above my heart, but it is no matter." So he's like, you wouldn't think so about it, but actually, no, I'm pretty on for this. I'm gonna smash this. And Horatio's like, "Nope, it's fine, okay." And Hamlet is like, "It's but foolery, but it's such a kind of gain giving as would perhaps trouble a woman." So we have this sense of realistically, look, there is a problem with this here, and there is essentially a kind of misgiving here about this certain circumstance, and maybe if you didn't know fencing and stuff, that you wouldn't get it. And there's also, I've got a bit of a misgiving about the odds themselves. He's like, I'm not quite sure this is that this is everything that's happening. Hamlet is kind of suspicious that there is something more than just the foolery that he describes. He thinks there's something more sinister. And he's absolutely right. We know that the king is trying to kill him off here. And Horatio says, "Look, if your mind dislikes anything, obey it. I will forestall their repair hither, and say you are not fit." So Horatio's like, "Look, if there's a risk of you getting injured here, I don't want you to do it. I just want you to go and do it when things are right, when everything's okay." Which seems it's very kind of Horatio. He's a very good friend to Hamlet. It's all very nice. But Hamlet is completely, he is completely not having it. He is just going to essentially accept things as they are. Yeah, he's not going to try and essentially, realistically kind of go in and explore fates and issues like that. He's just like, "Look, we are going to take things as they are. It's just things are going to happen. If I'm going to die when I'm going to die, essentially, because there's, not where we defy or agree. There is special providence in the fall of a sparrow. If it be, 'tis not to come. If it be not to come, will be now. If it be not now, yea, it will come. The readiness is all, since no man of aught he leaves but he leaves knows what is to leave betimes. Let it be." So Hamlet's like, "Look, I can't spend time and realistically just like worrying about when he's going to die, and he can't start reading fate. He's like, I'm going to die when I'm going to die. I just need to be ready to do so. Yeah, it could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be 30 years from now. Doesn't matter. I'm just going to be prepared for it." And I think this is the key thing with Hamlet. And it's actually following that scene in 5-1 where Hamlet starts to be perhaps much more aware of his own nature, of the nature of death in general, doesn't he? And much more kind of consistent with that. So let's have a look here on this essay from Richard Fly, where Hamlet states as follows. He says that Hamlet can glimpse the divinity that is shaping his end, the heaven that is ordinate in human affairs, the providence overseeing it all, but that does not diminish his sense of responsibility for his final action. So Hamlet is going to get these things done, whatever. He is aware that he might well be dying. He is aware that he is perhaps going to face a fate for the actions that he's going to undertake, but that is not going to put him off from taking those actions. Okay, so Hamlet is very much kind of on board with this plan, regardless of what happens to him and regardless of his fears. Now, here's where it kind of almost feels like a second scene. We have a full entrance here, a table prepared, trumpets, drums, officers, cushions, foils, daggers, the king, queen, Laertes, Osric, and all the states, everybody else who's left around, and like you've got people watching, you've got an audience. You've literally got the audience as well. Obviously, in the theatre at the time, in the Globe especially, this is obviously a stage that projects out into the audience, so you have audience members around the stage. This is the big spectacle scene. We remember that we have the big spectacle scenes in all of these plays. Revenge Tragedy relies heavily on moments of grand spectacle. Think about Act 4 in The Duchess of Malfi and the end scene there, which is quite a dramatically exaggerated one. Here we have the duel, which is often, even in the most bare bones production, is given the most kind of budget for its kind of settings and backdrops. I'll show you a couple of examples here. Here in the version starring Maxine Peake, which is really quite a minimalist style performance. It's very much a kind of, how to put it? Oh no, it's gone. Let's just go back to normal read. Never mind. Scroll back down. In the in this production, it's really quite a kind of low key. We'll do it as is production, but even then, we have this fully kind of like elaborate stage setting and stuff for the duel itself. In the RSC version from 2017, we have this full on. You've got these 4 fire. Kind of lights around it's kind of almost arena style thing, both of them in full kind of fighting get up with their kind of weapons. It's a really spectacular scene, and it's the kind of climactic moment at the end of the tragedy. So hopefully that's a really good kind of idea as to what is going on here. This is a really big it's a big budget final scene. So the king asks Hamlet to come and take hands with Laertes, to hold his hand, to cement, shake his hand, I suppose, at the start of the duel, to get everything up on board and running, to kind of cement that friendship that the queen is already trying to push for. And Hamlet comes up for this apology, and he says as follows, and I'll read his apology through, and then I will explore it in a little bit of detail. So Hamlet says, "Give me your pardon, sir, I've done you wrong, but pardon it as you are a gentleman. This presence knows, and you must needs have heard, how I am punished with a sore distraction, what I have done. That might your nature, honour, and exception roughly awake, I here proclaim was madness. Was it Hamlet wrong, Laertes? Never Hamlet. If Hamlet from himself be taken away, and when he's not himself does wrong Laertes, then Hamlet does it not. Hamlet denies it. Who does it then? His madness. If it be so, Hamlet is of the faction that is wronged. His madness is poor Hamlet's enemy. Let my disclaiming from a purposed evil free me so far in your most generous thoughts that I have shot my arrow over the house and hurt my brother." So Hamlet here basically says, look, Hamlet wasn't, and he literally says Hamlet, he keeps saying it in third person, he's like gone full Gollum on this one. He's like, it's not Hamlet's fault, Hamlet was mad, it's actually Hamlet's madness that was at fault, and really, if you think about it, I was the victim too when I accidentally killed your father and drove your sister to suicide. He's like, really, if anyone's to blame here, it's not me. To me, this is an odd apology and an odd excuse. If we go back to the document that I gave you, Hamlet apologizes to Laertes for his behavior on the basis that he's mad, right? So he apologizes that, yes, I was mad, that's what happened. But Hamlet admitted like 3 times in the play that his madness is a fake, it's a performance, it's a false performance of madness, so that Hamlet isn't really mad. So therefore, if Hamlet wasn't mad but he's blaming it on his madness, then that apology cannot be taken as a legitimate excuse. He's like going, yeah, I was mad, but we all know that Hamlet wasn't mad. So it seems like a hollow apology. And Johnson agrees with this. He says, I wish Hamlet had made some other defence. It is unsuitable to the character of a good or a brave man to shelter himself in falsehood. Johnson finds Hamlet a bit distasteful at this part of the play. He finds this apology just not good enough for Hamlet. Laertes doesn't really respond much better. He says, I am satisfied in nature, whose motive in this case should stir me most to my revenge. But in terms of honour, I stand aloof and will know reconcilement till, by some elder masters of known honour, I have a voice and precedent of peace to keep my name ungored. So Laertes is like, oh, look, I'll take it, I'll receive your offered love like that, and we'll just have to be, very good about this, and everything's going to be fine. Laertes is planning on poisoning Hamlet in a duel, the most underhand means of taking somebody out, which is equally, I suppose, disingenuous, equally hollow as Hamlet. So neither of these two. So we have this kind of dramatic tension here, where we see these two characters coming head to head. They make these apologies, but we know as the audience that those apologies aren't really true. And I think that actually only ramps up the tension here. That these men are kind of on the surface being pleasant to each other, but we know that deep down there's a kind of much more aggressive side to this duel. The king then goes through. They sort some stuff out. They praise each other a little bit. Laertes thinks that Hamlet's kind of mocking him a little. The king asks Osric to give them the foils. We talk about the bets. We talked about this earlier. We went through the bet stuff there. So Osric gives them the foils. Now we assume here that Osric seems to be aware of the nature of the bet as well. So of the poisoning thing. Hamlet asks Osric if the foils all have a length, and he replies here, yes, they are the same. Whereas later on, Laertes admits to Osric that he has been undone by his own poisoning. So there's the assumption here that Osric is in on the plan with the king and Laertes. It's not openly admitted, but not. Now the king then, having gotten all of the duels set up, the king says, set me the wine upon that table. Yeah, he's like, get the wine ready as well. Because obviously fencing and drinking are two things that should be combined. What could possibly go wrong? Hamlet explains to the crowd this great possibility of what he's going to do. It's very actually reminiscent of the drinking that he does earlier in the play when he kind of drinks to Mark's health. So he says, if Hamlet gives the first or second hit, or quits, i.e. wins, in answer of the third exchange, he says, let's all the battlements their ordnance fire. The king shall drink to Hamlet's better breath, and in the cup an union shall he throw, which is like a pearl, a jewel, richer than that which 4 successive kings in Denmark's crown have won. Give me the cups, and let the kettle to the trumpet speak, the trumpet to the cannoneer sound, with a cannoneer without, the cannons to the heavens, the heaven to earth. So he's like, I am going to, if he does this, I will throw this pearl into the wine, and we'll toast Hamlet, and he can drink. Now, obviously, this is not really a pearl, we assume, but instead the poison. There's some kind of contextual stuff about perhaps this was a kind of tactic used maybe at the time. You can look at one of the essays I've sent through to you this week on that front. So, yeah, I think that's pretty good. So we have this kind of big elaborate thing. The king is putting on a real show here. He's like, look, when Hamlet gets a hit, we're going to fire off all the guns. He's going to have a toast. He's going to win this thing. It's all going to be this elaborate thing. It's almost too much. The king has perhaps hyped it up to this higher extent. Now, obviously, we then have the duel itself. It's difficult with the nature of plays at the time, obviously, in terms of recording them, because we don't have proper stage directions. All we have is a couple of lines here between the two characters. No real directions to how the action is to be set out, which often leads to wildly varying scenes in terms of how this fight plays out between them. We have a couple of lines which give us some direction, but we don't have much in the way else. So we have the first hit here, where Hamlet hits Laertes. He says 1, no, and Osric judges it as a hit, a very palpable hit, as if that needed specifying. And we fire off, the drums, the trumpets, and the cannons all fire off. Yeah, there we go. Hamlet's gotten a hit, as the king promised. So the king is like, here's the drink. I've thrown the pearl in the cup. Here we are. On you go. Drink to your health. Give him the cup. And Hamlet's like, nope. I'm gonna keep fighting the duel. I'm gonna keep going. Let me finish this off. Yeah. Put the wine down. And then we assume that they start again. They play here. Come another hit. What say you? So Hamlet's like, look, I've hit him again. And this time Laertes is like, yeah, I admit it, I got hit. And the king is like, our son shall win. We assume this is directed towards the queen, I would imagine, given that he uses that kind of plural inclusive there with the our son shall win. And the queen follows his line up with he's fat and scant of breath. Now, this is not a line to suggest that Hamlet has somehow put on a bunch of weight since the start of the play. The line he's fat here we assume to mean something along the lines of fatigued or tired. Yeah. It's not to imagine that Hamlet has just, don't know, had significant weight gain since Act 4, like Act 5, Scene 1. Here, Hamlet, take my napkin, rub thy brows. The queen carouses to thy fortune, Hamlet. So it's like here, she is drinking a toast to your fortune. Yeah, here you go. Take my napkin and get yourself ready. I'm drinking to your fortune. You're 2 down. You've got 1 to go to win this things. Then you're on 3 and you've won the bet. Well done. And Hamlet's like, yep, good madam. And the king says the following. Gertrude, do not drink. At this point, we as the audience probably already realise that the drink is the poisoned wine, that Gertrude has picked it up by accident and is now to drink from the poison. Now, the Queen's line here is so important. I cannot quite stress to you enough how significant this line is in terms of interpreting Gertrude. So she says, I will, my lord, I pray you pardon me. Now, because she hears him say this, don't drink, and she says, I will, that's going to happen in the future. This sounds like she is making a direct decision to disobey the king. Okay? It sounds like she is going, I know what is in here, probably. I don't want it to get Hamlet, and I am going to make this decision now, hopefully to either prevent Hamlet from drinking any of it at all, or at the very least, to kind of draw our attention towards the queen. The king, sorry. Now, that being said, and obviously with that in mind, if she does know what's going on, if she knows what's in the cup, she is therefore killing herself. However, obviously, it could be a suggestion that she's just ignorant and that she's just going to do it regardless. That's potentially an option. Or, and this is the main thing, is that in other versions, this is actually changed up. So I'm sending a little poll through. Let me explain the second version way around. So I've put that little poll in there. But if you look into your footnotes of the edition, what you will see is during the 18th and 19th centuries, the Queen's line was often altered on stage to, I have, my lord, presumably to make it apologetic rather than defiant. And some performers make it clear that they are drinking the poison deliberately or not. So basically, in the 18th and 19th centuries, because, and this is the thing, is that actually in that time period, guys, in the 19th century especially, but the 18th as well, Shakespeare's plays were often, they weren't even as hugely regarded as they are now. They had to take a bit of a critical re-evaluation at some point. But most of his tragedies received changes. They received, notable alterations. To make them less controversial, to make them more kind of in line with kind of social standards, and sometimes just to make them less sad. King Lear gets a much happier ending in a weirdly hacky version in the 18th century. So their adaptation for changing it from I will to I have suggests that she has already drank from the cup when the king asks her not to, and that she is therefore just apologising to him, say, oh no, I'm sorry, I've already drank from it, rather than saying, no, you go, head off, I'm drinking this myself. And even if she is defiant, it's not necessarily a guaranteed intentional suicide. It might still be accidental. But from our poll so far, the general reading seems to be 100% that we believe that Gertrude knows what she's doing, which is often the modern version anyway, especially. This leads me to a stretch question, which we can ask, and you could be asking yourselves, I suppose, is this. Gertrude's decision to drink can be interpreted as an act of suicide. If so, it is possible then that both female and the only female characters in the play, Ophelia and Gertrude, are ones that kill themselves. This then perhaps opens up this question that you might want to think about as just to kind of get your head around some of the kind of ideas in the play. So the Denmark Shakespeare presents is so oppressive that the only option left for his female characters is suicide. To what extent do you agree with this assessment of Hamlet as a play? So that might be a question you want to think about before during the kind of week or so as we go on to your revision in terms of thinking about these characters within the play, is that actually, are they actually just almost forced into this action because of the kind of nature and actions of the men around them? So, with that all in mind, let's crack on. So the king, in case the audience wasn't paying attention, the king does a really almost fourth wall breaking aside where he says, it is the poisoned cup, it is too late. And Hamlet's like, no, I'm not going to drink. I'll drink it later. And the queen's like, let me just wipe your face then. Laertes then starts to have some asides with the king. He has his little conspiratorial asides. My lord, I'll hit him now. He's like, I'll get him now. And the king is like, I don't think you will. Yeah, I do not think it. Yeah. So we have this kind of implication here that he is things. What you will notice though is that the king having noticed this, and he's now getting into this conversation with Laertes. At no point ever does the king go, oh, better try and save the queen from the poison. Now whether that's possible or not, I don't know. Maybe he knows that there's no cure to this. Usually, I would imagine poisons are supplied with a kind of an antidote, so to speak. And he makes no attempt to save her, perhaps indicating that he's really willing to let her die rather than his plan be exposed. So how it's like, Laertes at this point, however, his last line here, and it is almost against my conscience, is like, I'm not sure I want to kill Hamlet anymore. He seems to be having doubts about his actions. Laertes seems to be growing a kind of conscience here. And he's kind of becoming a little bit less the typical bloody revenger, the Pyrrhus that we've talked about earlier in the play. So Hamlet's like, come for the third, Laertes, you do but dally. I pray you pass with your best violence. And this is a kind of nicely ironic line. He's like, I hope you come at me with your best violence. I'm sure you make a wanton of me, so make a coward of me. Hamlet here, come at me with your strongest blows or whatever. Now, obviously, he will do. He will cut him and poison him in this scene. So Laertes is like, come on then. And then we have a kind of a draw, so to speak. Nothing either way. And then they scuffle, they change rapiers, whatever happens. Hamlet is clearly cut within this period. There's a kind of general mess here. We don't really have any specific directions in this section, other than a couple of things happen. Clearly they both get cut. They bleed on both sides, most likely cut. Well, they are cut by the same sword. So at some point Hamlet gets Horatio's sword and cuts him as well. Not Horatio. Jesus, Horatio's not fighting here. Laertes' sword and cuts him up. Horatio's commenting on this. And we know that the queen falls over, collapses from the poison during this section, but there's no really specific, kind of stage directions in here. Fundamentally, Osric comes over and asks Laertes, how's it going? And Laertes is like, yep, like a woodcock to mine own spring, which is if you remember, guys, the woodcock, I believe, is the bird that is used by Polonius in his advice to Ophelia earlier. That is a lovely bit of callback. Like a woodcock to my own spring, to my own trap. Osric, I am justly killed with mine own treachery. So this is a running theme throughout the play, guys, of that schemers and planners are often undone by their own schemes. Hamlet talks about blowing people being hoisted by their own petard earlier on with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. They were killed by their own actions. Here Laertes is just the same. Hamlet, I suppose, the same. The king, the same. Etc, etc, etc. And you might actually, guys, think about this in terms of the Duchess of Malfi as well, when we look at things like the brothers at the end being essentially killed by their own scheming. This idea that the corrupt villains, the Machiavellian figures in these revenge tragedies tend to be killed as a direct consequence or in this case directly as a result of the specific actions that they take. So that's actually quite a useful bit of content there for us. So Hamlet's like, what's going on with the queen? She's fallen over, and the king is still going with his covering everything up approach. He talks here at the end. He has the split line from Hamlet, so he jumps on Hamlet's question. He's like, "Yep, she swoons to see them bleed." She is just, I suppose a kind of a weak-moraled woman who has just collapsed to see the kind of, the extravagance of violence on the stage. Obviously, no, she has not. She is poisoned. She is dying. And she gets this line. No, the drink. the drink. Oh, my dear Hamlet, the drink, the drink. I am poisoned. And then she dies. So she admits to the poisoning, and that she has been killed. Hamlet then, asks, he cries out that there has been a villainous act committed. He asks the door to be locked, and he says, there has been treachery here. The queen has been killed, and he asks the guards to seek it out. Osric goes off to lock the doors, we assume, maybe to get out of the way. And Laertes is like, here you go, Hamlet. It is here. You are slain. No medicine in the world can do you good. In you there is not half an hour's life. The treacherous instrument is in your hand, unbaited and envenomed. The foul practice hath turned itself on me. Lo, here I lie, never to rise again. Thy mother's poisoned. I can no more. The king's to blame. So Laertes is like, yep, here it is. Here's all of our plan. Let me tell you everything in great detail. I am poisoned now. I am going to die. You are going to die. You can't save yourself. The queen also dying. The king's poisoned her, and the king is entirely responsible for this. Now, this is the first step in the process by which Shakespeare seems to kind of remove any of the guilt from Laertes as a means of perhaps placing more villainous qualities onto the king. Laertes apologises here. Him and Hamlet exchange some apologies in a second. I think fundamentally to not dilute the antagonist in the play. I think it's very clear that we need Claudius to be the out-and-out villain. So Hamlet's like, the point envenomed too, and he's like, then venom to thy work. So he goes and, in various versions, does something along the lines of stabbing, cutting, whatever, the king. The lords cry out treason at this point. Now, whether that is treason to Hamlet, i.e. that his attack on the king is treasonous, or whether they believe that the king's actions, as pointed out here, are treasonous, is very ambiguous. Obviously, again, down to the production. Usually, it tends to be the way that the king has kind of committed treason. The king obviously then requires his, the rest of the characters to defend him. He's like, defend me, my friends. I am but hurt. It's okay. Don't worry. I'm not going to get killed here. And Hamlet really reinforces the themes of the whole play here. He's like, look, you incestuous, and it leads here again throughout the play, this mixing of the murder of his father and, actually, as Hamlet says in his own words, the whoring of his mother have been the two issues. And here he focuses on his mother first. He says, you incestuous, damned probably, Dane, drink of this potion. Is the union here? Follow my mother. So he checks to see if this is the poison cup, and then he forces the king, we assume, usually, to drink from the poison as well. So the king gets double poisoned and dies immediately. Quite a fitting end, I assume, then, for the king, who has been poisoning people all play long, or wanting to poison them all play along, and corrupt and doing these things, and now he is forced to engage with that himself. Laertes then is like, yep, he is justly served. He has, he's received the right justice for him. It is a poison tempered by himself, so he's getting his own payback. And then he's like, look, Hamlet, exchange forgiveness of me. My life and my father's death come not upon thee, nor thine on me. Now, interestingly here, that Laertes is like, I forgive you for my father's death and mine. He doesn't mention Ophelia at all here, even though that would seem to be the main cause of his aggression towards Hamlet at the graveside. A weird one, that, but he basically says, look, you're not responsible for my death. I'm not responsible for yours. Let's just apologise and be friends. And Hamlet's like, yep, fine, that's all good. I'm going to die anyway, so here we all are. He's like, let heaven make you three of it. He's like, I am dead, Horatio, wretched queen, adieu. So let's have a quick look. I wanted to have a look at this final section in a bit more detail. So this is the final soliloquy, the monologue, I suppose, that Hamlet has. Now, almost all tragedies, guys, end in this kind of death monologue from the figure, the main tragic figure. Hamlet then obviously says goodbye, adieu to the wretched queen. Again, guys, wretched not meaning like what we kind of tend to use wretched to mean now, but wretched at this time period, probably mostly using something like, unfortunate, unlucky. You that look pale and tremble at this chance, that are but mutes or audiences. So he almost kind of calls out the kind of lords around him, yeah? Perhaps even the audience themselves, yeah? Literally he uses the word audience, which is quite a nice one. He's like, had I but time, as this foul sergeant death is strict in his arrest, oh, I could tell you, but let it be. So he's like, look, I need to justify myself. I'm aware of that, but I'm going to die very quickly, so I can't. He's like, Horatio, I am dead. You are alive, report me and my cause aright to the unsatisfied. So Hamlet here, upon dying and realizing his death, he realizes that he needs to clear his name in order to be kind of fully happy at his death. He hates the idea of dying, and if that idea that the other characters were saying that he was committing a treasonous act, I mean, he literally has killed the king. He has committed regicide, which is probably the most punishable crime of the time period. I suppose up there with blasphemy, especially if you believe that the divine right of kings. He's committed terrible crime, and he needs to be kind of reported aright. He needs to be acknowledged as the best figure he could be at this time period. And Horatio's like, look, don't believe, I'm not going to do that. I'm more of a Roman than a Dane. I'm going to drink some of this poison too. And Hamlet's like, yeah, none of that. Slaps the cup out of his hand. And then he says, look, Horatio, what a wounded name you would leave me if you did that. So, if you did ever love me, and he kind of pulls the same trick that the ghost does. He said, look, if you ever did hold me in thy heart, basically, don't do what you want to do now. Tell my story to the world, and then you can do what you want after that point. Which is kind of a weird kind of end set of lines. We then hear some kind of marching from outside and a shot from within. And we have this sense here that, Hamlet's like, what is this noise? And then Osric comes back to say that young Fortinbras is here from Poland. He's won in Poland. He just wants to see us and say hello. And the ambassadors of England have also arrived. And we're getting this volley as well. So it's like, hang on a minute, the ambassadors from England are back. And then Hamlet's like, oh, I'm dying. This poison's killing me off. I don't want to hear the news from England. He kind of almost has a sense of regret here about his killing of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. But he prophesies, or he basically places the election on Fortinbras, that he has his dying voice. Now, this was a primary means of electing, I suppose, on this deathbed, if this is the circumstance you're in, the deathbed election of the next monarch. And this is what a lot of contest was about, was the fact that there was a lot of kind of suspicions and contests about whether Elizabeth did make this or not. But Fortinbras gets the nod. Here is a nice picture of Fortinbras, really reinforcing the military angle of Fortinbras, that in this production of the 2017 RSC one, he turns up in full military garb. And that kind of brings us right up to the end of the play. Fortinbras comes in. The section is kind of interesting, and I'll let you kind of read some of the critics about him more than really go through it myself, because we're kind of running out of time. But Fortinbras turns in and he asks this question, where is this site? And he's like, Horatio's like, hang on, you don't really want to have a look at this. And then basically Fortinbras is like, this whole thing this quarry is havoc. Yeah. This whole thing is a mess. What has gone on here? Why are there so many, princes at a shot have been struck down? So Fortinbras has quite a noble spirit. The ambassador then says as well, oh, by the way, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Who do I need to tell? We need to be thanked for this act. Who should be telling? And Horatio's like, look, not from anyone's mouth. This is all grim. Everything's kind of gone a bit wrong. And that's that, realistically. So to skip to the end then, just to clarify, Fortinbras basically says this: let 4 captains bear Hamlet like a soldier to the stage, for he was likely, had he been put on, to have proved most royal, and for his passage the soldiers' music and the right of war speak loudly for him. Take up the bodies, such a sight as this becomes the field, but here shows amiss. Go bid the soldiers shout. So he says, look, take Hamlet's body up, give him a soldier's burial. That's what he should have deserved. This whole scene is not moral, it's not right. No one deserves this kind of death. We need to do it properly. Okay, so that is the end of the play. As I said, some versions don't have Fortinbras at all. The David Tennant version, that 2010 BBC version, does not have it. They cut it out completely. That's that, guys. Quick reminder then of our tasks for this week. They are over here. And that's that. Okay, so I will see you all next week. Cool. All right. Bye, guys.